Okay, gewaltig. So yesterday we learned that Nochrim don't have Nazirs. Hey, I don't know if you noticed yesterday, my Gemara yesterday read Kutim Ein Lam Nazirs. And here it says Nochrim Ein Lam Nazirs. It must have had to do with the censor because there are different Gersois. But yesterday, when I learned the Gemara, I used the Masifta Gemara yesterday, and the Mishnah starts with Hakutim Ein Lam Nazirs. But this version says Hagvar, Anochrim Ein Lam Nazirs. What does the Arshkol say? Nochrim or Kutim for the beginning of the Mishnah?
It says Kutim.
Oh, and I remember even you asked me yesterday. You asked a Kutim Geryoy, so I told you, but the Mafarish says I've the Gravim. Somebody asked that, or maybe the doctor did. Dr. Phillipson asked. So here we see it means Nochim. It was a question of the censors. Okay, so let's see the Gemara Vachis. The Gemara discussed yesterday how we know that Avodim are included in the rules of Naziris. We know it because it says Aleihem l'Rabbi says Avodim. Why would we even need a pasuk to include Avodim and Naziris if they're like women and women have Naziris? The answer is because by Nidarim in general, the Torah says lesser Israel nafshoi, and the Eved doesn't own his soul. He doesn't have himself. Therefore, you might think he's not included into the parsha of the Naziris as well as Nidarim. Kamashlan Aleihem l'Rabbi says Avodim. How do you know that a goy is excluded from the parsha of Naziris? We had two mahalchim at the end. One was, it says, and we've proven that a goy cannot become tamei. That was one mahalach. The other mahalach was, we had some attempts at discussing whether a goy is considered someone who has a father. That didn't work. So the Gemara ended up saying is that the whole premise under which the Gemara wanted to suggest that a goy should be included at least somewhat in the parsha of Naziris is because of a comparison from Erechin. By Erechin it says Dabar al Bnei Yisrael, which excludes goyim. It says Ish, which includes goyim. So the Brisa of Firzois, it's a hybrid. A goy is somewhat in the parsha of Erechin, but not fully. How does that manifest itself? A goy cannot be ma'arich, but a goy could be ne'erach. A goy cannot be makabel upon himself to give Erechin of anybody or himself to the Beis HaMikdash, but he could be the subject of an Erechin. So someone could say the Erech of John should be alive. So he's a hybrid. So the Gemara wanted to say, by Naziris it also has Bnei Yisrael and Ish. So why don't we say there's a hybrid? What would the hybrid be? The hybrid would be that although a goy is in the parsha of Naziris, he has the prohibitions of drinking wine and becoming tamei, nevertheless, there's no karbonis involved. We know by Nazir Yisrael there's a karbonis involved. After he finishes Naziris, there's karbonis. If he becomes tamei, there's karbonis. A guy wouldn't have the parsha of karbonis. The Gemara said that would not be an option because we have an independent pasuk in a different parsha that says la'oila, and from there we know that a guy doesn't bring karbonis Nazir. So therefore, you cannot learn Ish to tell you that, and therefore we'll have to find something else to do with the word Ish. But Levnei Yisrael in the parsha of Naziris totally excludes a guy. The Gemara suggested there's many different types of nuances we can pick, cases we can pick, nafkaminis that we could pick, where a guy would have partial Naziris but not full Naziris, and maybe that's what the Ish is referring to. And then we could apply Naziris, at least in some way, to a guy. So the Gemara tried with Naziris Olam. That might be the distinction between a Jew and a guy. The Gemara said it's not mashma at all in the psukim, that's even a discussion there. The Gemara discussed maybe it's the fact that a yid could be madar b'noi, a goy can't be madar b'noi. Dr. Gemara, that's halacha l'moshe Messina. Halacha l'moshe Messina never is referred to or clarified in the pasuk. The halacha l'moshe Messina is the doctrine that it wasn't mentioned in the pasuk. The Gemara said maybe the distinction between a goy and a yid is that Yisrael magalchen al Nazir Savian, but a goy is not magalchen al Nazir Savian. Again, the Gemara says that is a halacha l'moshe Messina. So basically, since there's no way we can find some type of Naziris light that a goy has, but not the full Naziris that a yid has, since there's no way we could find such a thing, we're left to say that Ish in the parsha of Naziris is not marba goyim to the parsha of Naziris in any capacity whatsoever. That's how we finished it up yesterday. So we have two sources for the fact that a goy cannot become a Nazir. Back to Gemara. If that's the case, it says Ish kiyapli neder berkecha be'erchin lamam. Why do we need the pasuk of Ish kiyafli by erchin? We just said Ish by erchin is to tell you that a goy could be nerach. Now the Gemara is suggesting you shouldn't even need ish, and I would know anyway that a goy could be nerach. You shouldn't even need the word ish by erchen. Why not? Michdi. Let's think about this. Ha-ishkis erchen l'nedarim. We know that the same rules that apply to erchen apply to nedarim. Where do we know that from? The Amar Kra ish ki yafli neder be'erkecha. V'atanya gab nedarim. And we learned by nedarim ish. It says the word nedarim by ish as well. So therefore, ma tamad loy mar ish l'rabbis es ha'ovid kechavim shem noidrin nedarim u'nedavis k'Yisrael. We know there's a hekesh from neder to erchen. We also know there's a hekesh from erchen to nazir. They're all one happy family. But since I already know by nedarim that a goy is included in the parsha of nedarim, I obviously will know that same halacha by erchen, that a goy is included in the parsha of erchen. So then why do I need the ish by erchen to tell me that a goy is in the parsha of erchen? The ish by neder already tells me that the goy is in the parsha of nedarim and erchen. Ish ki yafli be'erchen namali. So this ish that we were talking about that tells you that erchen applies to a goy, I don't need that ish. I know by erchen that applies to a goy without the ish mentioned by erchen because I have the word ish mentioned by neder. Elahai ish mi boyle. So what are we going to use this extra word ish to teach us? L'suye muflo samach ish, to tell you that even if he's not a complete adult, he only has seichel. Even that person's neder would be a good neder. That's the ish from erchen. That's correct. That will work out really well if you hold muflo samach ish daraisa because you have a pasuk ish by erchen to teach it to you. If you're going to learn that muflo samach ish is only midirabanan, so you can't say you're learning that out of the pasuk. It's a dirabanan. So therefore, ish kiyapli lamali. Why do I need ish kiyapli? So once again, we're on the prowl to find a purpose for the word ish. So tomorrow, maybe it's lisuye muflo samach ish la'ovid kechavim. Do you see what an unbelievable thing this is? It's possible that muflo samach ish by a yid might only be derabanan, but mufla hasamach lish for a goy would be deraisa. Do you ever find that there should be a bigger chumrah by a goy than by a yid? So we're trying to speak about it. So one typical example is if your ox shtoishes a goy's ox, I think you're potter. But if a goy's ox shtoishes your ox, the goy is chayiv nezek shalem. While if your ox shtoishes a yid's ox the first time, you would only have to pay chatzi nezek. So it's not unheard of that there should be chumras that apply to a goy and not to a yid. But there are big complications with this mufla samach ish that I don't have all the answers to, but at least I want to share the difficulties about this. And that is, we know by a yid, their shiurim that are halacha l'moshe Sinai. So therefore, a man becomes mechuyev in mitzvahs and mechuyev in onshim when he becomes bar mitzvah, 13. That's halacha l'moshe Sinai. A girl is 12. What is the age at which a goy is mechuyev in his mitzvahs? The halacha l'moshe Sinai of 13 doesn't apply to a goy. There's no such thing as a goy less than 13 is part of a mitzvah. By a goy is the moment he's aware and he understands, boom, that's when he's mechuyev in all halachas. So isn't that what mufla samach ish is? So we do need some clarity, and I'll try to do some homework on it and come back tomorrow. But we do need some clarity on what is mufla samach ish. It sounds like mufla samach ish is maybe even before they're even considered fully aware and in adulthood, even for a goy. But that's what I have to get clarity about. So let's see the Gemara back. Now this is exactly the opposite of what we learned yesterday. But there's a mandamar who holds that goyim are not fully included in the Parsha of Erchin. It's not like what we thought, that they cannot be marich, but they could be nerech. It's exactly the opposite. They cannot be nerech, but they could be marich. And you might think they're totally out of the Parsha of Erchin, that they can't even donate an Erchin. Talmud Lomer ish, chopper, that would fit in pretty good. And Laman Amar b'nei Yisrael marichin. But if you want to learn the opposite way, that where is the goyim lacking in their access to Erchin, that they cannot be marich, but they could be nerach, yachaloyu nerachin. Talmud Lomer ish, afilu tinik ben chodesh bari ruchi, who even a tinik ben chodesh is a bari ruchi, could be nerach. So kiyafli lomali. In other words, Kiyavli is saying a mukla samach leish. If you are being the marich, sure, we have to have a certain level of understanding to be the marich. So a mukla samach leish is someone who's old enough to be marich. But if you learn the whole access that goyim have to erich and ishbir, they could be nerach, so they're the subject. They don't need to have any type of das. So even a little kid has an erich, and once a child's 30 days old, he has an erich. So then, vayter kiyafli lamali, what do we need to know anything about mukla samach leish? We're only talking about the subject of the erichin. Amrab adabar abba. So now we have to say ish is not to include mukla samach leish. We have to try something else. What we have to try is lisuye ovid gechavim gadol. It's include an ovid gechavim gadol. The afagav the gadol who. Let's see the lashon habach. The afagav the gadol who. The eini yedev lahaplois loy. It's coming to tell you that ovid gechavim gadol, even though he's a gadol, if he doesn't know how to be mafla. I'm not sure what. So let's see what the Rashi says. So you ovid gechavim gadol. The afagav the gadol who. So lisuye doesn't mean a gadol who's not able to, a gadol who understands. We're talking about fakert. We're not talking about a gadol who's not able to understand his erchen a good erchen. To the contrary, a gadol whose erchen who doesn't understand his erchen is not a good erchen. So lisuye doesn't really mean to include; it means to exclude. The Hashmina it teaches us the heicha the ha'ovet yichavim einu yedei lahaplois. If a goy, even though he's an adult, but he's not of sound mind, and he's not able to articulate and understand what he's saying properly, ein nidroi neder, his neder will not be a valid neder, afagav the gadol. Masha enkim be Yisrael, by a yid, the gadol nidroi neder afilu einu yedei lahaplois. A yid's neder is a neder if the words that in the darb come out of his mouth, even if he doesn't know how to articulate it properly, it will still be a good neder. I'm probably wrong. He is of sound mind. He's not a sound mind. He's like a shoyter. It probably means he didn't express the nusach properly. The problem is, we're just saying now that a goy cannot be marich. He can only be nerach. So vayter what it's negeh. Zogt Toisus, you're right. This is only negeh in the Dorim. So the word ish by erchin is teaching us halacha about goyim that's completely irrelevant to erchin. It's only relevant to the Dorim. But that's not a problem. Im time of erchin kaiminon bafilu oivdichavim godol yoydei lahaplis ein marichin yeshloimar the meinin erchin tnei in nedarim. Since we look at erchin and nedarim as one blended halacha, we could have limudim by erchin that will actually be teaching us halachas by nedarim. I mean, it's not that because they're blended. We find many times in the Gemara where there's a limud about a pasuk, and the Gemara says that you don't need the limud for what the pasuk is talking about, you can apply it to something else. Right. So he doesn't use the right syntax. Oh, so it's talking about his chachma. Okay. So the ArtScroll says, Chaim Fear is reading for us, is that Eina Yodei Lahaplois means he doesn't have enough of a clarity of an understanding what it means to make a nether. So by a goy, that wouldn't be a good nether, but by a yid, it would be a good nether. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. Zok the Gemara weiter. The word lapli means to clearly utter a vow, and that means clarity of words and clarity of mind. So Zok the Gemara. So now we've explained what ish is used for by erich. Ela kiyafli because of Rachmana Gab and Naziris lamali. Why do we need the pasuk of kiyafli by Naziris? Like we said, Naziris is also ishkis to nedarim and erichin. Michdi ha'ishkish Naziris l'nedarim. I believe the aleph sticks in erichin as well because they're all one happy family. Naziris l'nedarim l'erichin, right? So whatever applies to either nedarim or erichin should also equally apply to Naziris. So therefore, kiyafli lamali. Why do I need the lotion of kiyafli by Nezer? Now the question is, it comes to include yadayim she'ein mechichos. Is that to tell you that they are yadayim, or is that to tell you that they're not yadayim? So that's actually a big shaila here, how to be goyish in the Gemara. So let's start off by saying, that they're not Yodayim. So if one a Yodayim shein mechicha, the Nazir is walking by, and the guy says, aha, it's not clear what he wants to be. So it's to teach you that that's not Yodayim. L'su Yodayim shein mechicha that are not Yodayim. I'm alluding to like one pshat in the Rishonim. The Itmar we learned, Yodayim shein mechicha, Abaya Amar havin Yodayim, Rav Amar loy havin Yodayim. So we're going to be following now Rava. We're saying that Tiapli by Naziris tells you that Yudayim She'enim Mechichos are not Yudayim. They're not a good expression of a neder of a Naziris. Like Rava says, like having Yudayim. Zokt Gemara la Abaya Nicha. According to Abaya, it will be good. Now, I believe Tosfos has a girsa that says the opposite. It says la Rava Nicha la Abaya Ma'ikal Meimar. So I'm looking right over here. Hanicha la Rava ela la Abaya Ma'ikal Meimar. Zokt Gemara el Kiyafli. You'll have to say mi boyele licher Rav Tarfon. Maybe we're using Kiyafli to tell us Rav Tarfon's halacha, and that was a halacha that we once learned. What was Rav Tarfon's halacha? What happens if Yankel and Yosel are standing here and they see someone coming towards them? And Yankel says, "I'm a Nazir if that's Reuven," and Yosel says, "I'm a Nazir if that's not Reuven." Rav Tarfon holds no matter if that's Reuven or not, neither one is a Nazir. Why? Because at the time where they uttered that Kabbalist Naziris, it was not clear about either one if they were a Nazir. Therefore, neither one is a Nazir. You need an extra level of clarity. Why? Because so maybe the Kiyafli by Naziris is to tell you Rav Tarfon's halacha. That's really nice if you agree with Rav Tarfon. They hold you don't need such a high level of clarity by Naziris, and the person who turns out being right in this nai, he's the one who's going to be a Nazir. So why do we need Kiyafli? Once again, what is the purpose of the word Kiyafli? Stated in the Parsha of Naziris, it already has those Lashonis in the Darim and Erechin. We know whatever we need to know. What extra information is the Kiyafli by Naziris bringing to the party? The fact that you could be mat in the Darim, there's very little basis. There's no basis in the Torah for it. It's all what Chachamim understood, but there's no place mentioned clearly in the Torah anything about het nedarim. I'm sorry. So that's enough to be parcha b'aver. Ve'ein lahen al mashi yismoichu. We don't even have a proper pasuk to lean on when we're saying this whole idea of a Taurus nedarim. Zogt the Gemara. Rabbi Eliezer Omer yesh lem al mashi yismoichu. Shenemer is kiyapli. So if you don't hold a Tarfon and you cannot use kiyapli to say that ein echad mem nazir, you can use it to say that from kiyapli there is a little bit of a remez to teach us midaraisa this concept of het nedarim, because it says kiyapli shtei pamim, as the Torah says echad b'pashas nazir ve'echad b'pashas nedarim, and therefore echad aflal isur ve'echad aflal heter. Why are there two aflos? Because some expressions will be usur if there's no Pesach found, and some aflos, even if it's a proper expression, it might be mutter anyway because a Pesach could be found, and that's where Chazal hang their hat on when they teach us. We had several prokim about how your matzah nedarim. All of those prokim are based on two words, kiyafli. Those two words generated material for several prokim in Maseches Nazir. Tosfos points out, in all this conversation, we never once found the purpose for the word ish that it says by Nazir. Right? We asked, why do you need ish by Erechin? But we never got back to Nazir, what you need ish for. Because ish is not being marba goy, because we already said Bnei Yisrael excludes a goy in every way. So we don't have anything to do with the word ish as stated in the Parsha of Nazir. So Tosfos don't forget that. Maybe it's extra, maybe it throws it in because it wants to keep a similar language. But at the end of the day, the Gemara never came out with a clear explanation of what we're using for the word ish in the pasuk of Nazir. We mentioned in the last Mishnah that there's a chaymer by Noshim than by Avodim, because we said by Avodim the Adain could just force the Eved to violate the terms of his Naziris. But you cannot force your wife to violate the terms of a Naziris. But there's a flip side. In a certain way, the Naziris of a Eved is more severe than the Naziris of a woman. Shahu made for Nidrei Ishlai. You could be made for your wife's neder, and the made for Nidrei Avdai. There's no din afora for an Eved. And there's a huge difference between afora and forcing your Eved to violate his Naziris. Because hafer le'ishtoi, hafer lamas. If you're made for your wife's neder, even if you divorce her or if you die, she doesn't have the neder does not come back. It's forever gone. Mashayk and hafer la'avdoi, of course you can't be made for la'avdoi. If you forced your Evet to violate the Naziris, well then yatsa lecheris mashlam Nazirusai. It just means that you could force him not to follow the restrictions of his Naziris. But once he's free, once he's gone, he's still a Nazir. So you see, in a way, that Avodim have a greater chumrah. We don't. We learn from Alayim. That was the whole part. We don't learn from Noshim. On Amar Aleph, the Gemara asked, why do you need Alayim? Because you would think you let Noshim, but it says by Nidarim, Kiyid Nefesh. He's not the owner of his nefesh. Taner Rabbanan. Lama Rabbi Koifai L'Naziris Avaloi L'Nidarim Verechim. We have a Mishnah here by Nazir that the Adon can force the Evet to violate his pro. You don't want to eat wine, you don't want to eat grapes. I insist that you eat grapes. But nether you don't find that an Adon can force his Eved to violate his Nadarim. So what if an Eved didn't make Naziris? He just says, I won't eat grapes. There, the Adon can't force him to eat grapes. What's the difference? Zok Gemara Maishna Gabay Nazir, the Amar Rachmana, Lesser Israel Nafshoi. By Nazir, we use a pasuk that's actually written in the Parsha of the Nadarim that says Lesser Israel Nafshoi to say B'misha Nafshe Knuyeloi, Yatsa Eved She Nafshe Knuyeloi, Ihachi Afilu Gabay Nadarim Nami. So why don't you say the same halacha by Nadarim? If the Eved makes a neder that the Adon doesn't like, he could force him to violate. Amar Rav says, Hacha b'may askinon kegoyin shehaya eshkel shel anovim munach lefana. Where do we say there's a chumrah by Naziris, which doesn't apply to Nadarim? There's a cluster of grapes sitting here on the table. And this is the cluster of grapes that the Eved prohibited himself from eating. So Gaba Nadarim, the chimitzer b'hai, lemitzer b'achrini. He's not preventing himself from eating grapes. He's preventing himself from eating these grapes. So therefore, loimotzi kapala, he can't force him. Why? Because under what premise is the Adon forcing his Evet to eat grapes? He should be strong, he should be healthy, he should be able to produce. Just because he can't eat this cluster of grapes, there's others that he could eat. It won't impact the performance of the Evet. But Gaba Nazir is the Chemitza Bahai, Itzer Bekulu. He's going to be also to eat any type of grapes. So how is he going to grow up to be big and strong? Therefore, Motzi Kafile. Correct, Gemara, that doesn't make sense. Because Nadarim aren't limited to a nether on one cluster of grapes. The Gaba Nadarim, Milo Yaskinon, the Lek Ela Hayeshko. By Nadarim, it's possible also that this is the only thing to eat, and if he won't eat it, he won't be healthy. And still, we're saying the Adon cannot force the Evet to eat it. Ela Amar Abaye, the Bach changes this to Abaye. Ela Amar Abaye, it was something that doesn't make you strong. There was just a seed. Gaba Nadarim, Bahayu de Mitzer, Loy Matzikafalei. He's asking himself to eat a charton. Big deal. That's not really going to impact his health. Therefore, the Adon can't force his Evet to eat it. But Gabi Nazir, the Itzanami Ba'achrini, where he'll be also to eat every type of grape product, there Matzi Kafalei. But once again, the Gabi Nadarim, Milo Yaskinon, the Leka Elaho Charton. What if we're talking about in a time where there's nothing to eat, and this is the only source of food that the Evet has? Yet you're still saying the Adon cannot force the Evet to eat the charton if he made a nether merely on the charton. Yet it's going to impact his performance. El Amar Rava, Lama Rabbi Tzarech L'Chafoisai L'Naziris Vein Tzarech L'Chafoisai L'Nidarim Vein Tzarech L'Chafoisai L'Shvua. What is the reason why he could force him to violate the Naziris, but he can't force him to violate a nether or a Shvua? My taima, the Amar Kra Lahara Alahativ. It says Lahara Alahativ. When you make a nether, you can make a nether to make it good for you or bad for you. Ma Tavarishus. Just like if you make a nether to do something good for yourself, you're allowed to. You have a choice if you want to do something good. If you want to eat the grape, if you don't want to eat the grape. So too, If you want to make a nether to ask yourself, the only type of nether that's a good nether is a nether that you have a right to do that. An Eved who is going to deprive himself of proper nourishment, that's not his right to make such a nether because he's hurting his other. So therefore, we're saying a step further, not that the Adon cannot force his Eved to violate his nether. The Adon doesn't even have to force his Eved to violate a nether. It's not a nether. It's not within the right of the Eved to make a nether in the first place that could in any way impact the Adon. That's why by Nedarim you don't need any type of macha. By Nazir you need a macha. So let's see Tosus. Yotza lahar lacherem she'eino shus biyadai ulakach b'nedarim afilu b'loy macha sarav lechal haneder klal. The nether has zero validity if the nether can in any way impact the responsibility of the Evet to provide 100% performance to his Adon. Tahainu haras acherem, because by the Evet depriving himself of nourishment, he's hurting his Adon. To makish koichai, ve'nei chazak l'malacha, he's not going to be strong enough to do work. Yalfin nedarim is shavuos. We learned the halacha of nedarim from the halacha of shavuos, and in the parasha of shavuos, the chsiv ben lahar alahated. You could only make a nether on something that you have the right to make those decisions. If you don't have the right to make those decisions, your nedarim have absolutely no validity regarding them. Aval naziris ein lakishim nedarim. In this respect, we're not going to compare naziris to nedarim, and therefore, Pirish Harvituk, why? Mishum Darminu Perkama the Naziris Chal Vafilu al Davar She'ein Rishus Piyadin. How do we know that Naziris is Chal even on something that you don't have Rishus to? Because we learned it in the beginning of the Masechta. Going to Amar Shvu She'esta. What if somebody made a Shvu? I will drink wine. Because of Amar Reini Nazir, the halacha is Kididashin lesser Yain Mitzvah Kayain Rishus. Since Naziris will override any mitzvah that you have to drink wine, you see clearly. Alma Naziris Chal al Dover Shein Shus Biyadai. Naziris Chal, even if you don't have the right to deprive yourself of wine. So therefore, if Eved made a nether not to drink wine, that's not even a nether. There's no validity. If you made Naziris, it would be Chal. Ulakach Yochel Nami Naziris HaEved Kolzman Shalim Cha'adain. That's only if the Adon didn't protest. Aval Vadai Imicha. But if the Adon protested, Nidrosh Lesser Isal Nafshay, then the Lesser Isal Nafshay, the drasha that we made from that pasuk clicks in, and we say Mishanafshek Nuyiloi Shetoil Machos Arav. So now Lesser Yosel Nafshay is not saying he can't make Nazirs. He can make Nazirs, but the Adon has a right to force him to violate it. We don't need Lesser Yosel Nafshay by Nedarim. The word Lesser Yosel Nafshay is not even in the parsha of Nazirs. It's in the parsha of Nedarim. But for Nedarim, I don't need Lesser Isser because the Adon doesn't have to be Moicha because the nether has no validity to begin with. Therefore, Tanayu Inul Nazir is Gewaltig. Impacts his performance is null and void. That's right. And the Nazir, it will be valid, but the Adon has a right to overrule it. Let's see the next mission. Correct. Eved Avar Mikaneged Panav. What if the Eved ran away? The Eved ran away. So, since he ran away, now if his performance drops, it's no longer going to impact the Adon. Reb Meir because of that, Reb Meir says that the Eved cannot drink wine anymore because now it's not impacting his work for his Adon. Rabbi Yosy Amar Yishter. Rabbi Yosy says he's still allowed to drink wine. Zok to Gemara Lema b'deshmul k'mivavi. Let's say, what is the machlokes as to whether an escaped Eved is allowed to drink wine? Let's say it's totally in the halacha of Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel, hamafkir avdoi, if someone is mafkir is Eved, we're talking about a guy who ran away. What do you mean mafkir? So Tosfos tells us that if an Eved ran away, the Bailim would normally be miyayish. How am I ever going to recover him? So therefore, it's considered like I was mafkir, and the Eved that ran away, we look at it as if you were mafkir it. And what does Shmuel say? That means it's a completely free Eved. If it's a completely free Eved, of course, the prohibitions of his Naziris now will limit him from drinking wine. That's what Reb Meir said, Lo Yishta. Reb Meir is like the Shmuel. Reb Meir holds, you don't need to get Shikhr. The Eved is free, he's no longer an Eved. So Avada, the restrictions of his Naziris kick in. Rabbi Yosy less like the Shmuel. Rabbi Yosy doesn't hold of Shmuel, meaning he's still my Eved. Sure, he ran away now, but I'm going to get him back. So he still has to maintain the rules of his Adon, and he's allowed to drink wine so that he can stay strong, even though the Eved himself is trying to run away. Maybe say differently. Let's say everybody holds he went to L'cheres. And if that's the case, I understand Reb Meir's Sharav Lo Yishta. Why did Reb Yosy say Yishta? Elamandami Yishta. You know why Reb Yosy holds he can drink wine? Because Sabar Soif Mahader Hadar. The Balaam is not necessarily Mi'ayish. The Balaam knows that eventually the Eved's going to come back. And he's going to come back to his owner. Therefore, we say, Lishti Chamra, let him drink wine in violation of Naziris. So he shouldn't be weak, because he has a responsibility to his Adon to be at his top performance. And according to Reb Meir, I'd rather him not drink wine. You know why? Because he'll miss his good old Avos, right? He'll miss the good old days when I was an Eved. I was allowed to drink wine. Now I can't drink wine anymore. So the Adon is happy that he should not drink wine. So he'll say, you know what? I need a glass of wine so badly. I'm going to go back to my Adon so that I could buck the restrictions of the Naziris and drink wine again. Okay, Kavaltik. We'll stop here. Baruch Hashem, we were to finish it up. And tomorrow, Be'ez Hashem, we'll learn Daf Samach Gimel. Again, I might not be here in person tomorrow. I will not be here in person tomorrow. So we'll learn on Zoom, Be'ez Hashem. Go ahead.